Hi, I'm going to discuss about inflation in India. First, let's look at what is inflation. Inflation is the rate at which the general price level of goods and services are rising and consequently the purchasing power of the currency falling. Let's look at the history of inflation in India. First, 1950s. 1950s witnessed an average inflation of only less than 2%, but there were high variations year to year. Deflation occurred in 1952 to 53, which was of minus 12.8 percentage, which was attributed to high agricultural production. There was another high inflation in the year 1956 to 57 of 13.8 percentage due to the increased demand arising from the thrust in industrialization in the second five-year plan. Next, let's look at 1960s. The average inflation rose to 6.2 percentage. This was primarily due to the wars in 1962 and the famine in 1965. Bumper agricultural production in 1968 to 69 led to an inflation of minus 0.9. Next is 1970s. 1970s, the inflation level was very high. This was mainly due to two reasons. First, the agricultural sector, and second, the oil price shock. Inflation shot over 20% twice in 1973 to 74, which was of 20.2%, and 1974 to 75, which was 25.2%. High inflation continued till the end of the decade, which was 17.1 in 79 to 80. And now let's look at 1980s. The inflation averaged at 7.2% with lesser variability when compared to the previous decade, that is 1970s. But there were demand pressures from an expansion of fiscal policy, which was coupled with continued oil supply shocks. And last but not the least, let's look at 1990s and later. High fiscal and current deficit of 80s and the of payment issues in 90 triggered a crisis in 1991. The inflation rose to 13.7 percentage. But reforms post-crisis significantly reduced inflation. The inflation level came down to 99.8 in 1990 to 96, and from 96 to 2005, it was further reduced to 4.9 percentage. Next, let's look at four critical types of inflation that different countries are facing. First one, hyperinflation. Hyperinflation occurs when the money supply increases and the demand for the goods decreases. Because of this, the inflation level goes beyond more than 20%, and this is termed as hyperinflation. Next, we have stagflation, where both unemployment and inflation rise together. The third category is deflation, where the general price level of goods and services falls. And fourth is the core inflation, in which the price of the goods and services should remain same, but due to the increase in price of the oil supply, the food prices are affected. And now let's look at how inflation can be measured. Mainly, there are three indices for measuring inflation. First one is the wholesale price index (WPI). This index measures the price of a representative basket of wholesale goods. Second one is the consumer pricing index (CPI). This examines the weighted average of prices of a basket containing consumer goods and services. And the third is the GDP inflator, which is the ratio of the nominal GDP to the real GDP and expressed in percentage. India traditionally measured inflation using WPI, but in 2012, RBI switched from WPI to CPI for making policy matters. Why was this done? Although WPI can be easily calculated and provides a quicker response to the monetary policy changes, RBI still changed to CPI. All the developing countries generally use CPI. And why? What is the reason for this? First, CPI takes into consideration the actual flow on the side of the consumer, and WPI does not take into consider the services. Also, CPI takes care of all the economic realities, including the taxes and profits of the middleman. And One more thing that CPI takes care is the behavior of wholesalers when it comes to passing the prices of the goods and services on to the consumer. This means a more accurate and predictable action plan can be taken on. So, because of all these reasons, RBI switched from WPI to CPI. Thank you.